A few days ago, in my video Why Did Iran Suddenly Fall into Nationwide Unrest? From driving itself into a dead end to understanding why China insists on non-alignment, I already carried out a fairly systematic analysis of Iran as a country. Over the past couple of days, quite a few viewers have come back to me asking me to talk more about Iran. The gist of their question is simple. Is the US preparing to strike there? How should we look at this? Let's start with what happened in Venezuela some time ago. Back then, some people, possibly even some AIs, spent several days hyping things up after the U.S. abducted Maduro. But it quickly became clear that Venezuela kept operating as usual, and the United States couldn't really get its hands in. What was even more ridiculous was this. Before anything was actually theirs, Trump pulled together all the slightly larger U.S. oil companies for a meeting and said, "From now on, Venezuelan oil is ours. Everyone should actively invest." He was immediately slammed for it. The CEO of Chevron, for example, said bluntly to his face, "How are we supposed to invest in Venezuela?" Yes, Venezuela has oil, that's true, but it's mostly heavy crude, with extraction costs close to $80 a barrel. And what's the current international oil price? A little over $60 a barrel. If we really followed your advice and invested, we'd lose more than $20 on every barrel we produce. So what's going on here? Trump probably only knew that Venezuela has the world's largest proven oil reserves. He likely had no idea how high Venezuela's extraction costs actually are, and assumed that once Maduro was taken, vast amounts of oil would just fall into his hands. The result was this. Maduro became a hot potato. Whether to jail him or release him would both be major problems. And Venezuelan oil held zero appeal for U.S. oil companies, let alone being worth fighting over. About a week later, that whole bubble burst. In fact, we had already analyzed this outcome on the very day Maduro was abducted. You can see our article from then. Breaking: the most shocking thing, Americans have captured Maduro. So over the past couple of days, those online voices crowing about China losing in South America, praising the invincibility of the U.S. military, and hyping Trump as some kind of genius suddenly went quiet. So what now? The only option left was to switch topics and divert attention. Claim that Iran is finished, that the U.S. is about to strike Iran, and that Iran will soon be crushed. How should we judge this? On the surface, it does feel like dark clouds gathering before the storm. Right now, the US and several European countries are warning their citizens not to travel to Iran. The U.S. has even withdrawn embassy personnel from the country. Caught in the middle, Qatar is anxiously pleading with both sides. "Please don't fight. If you do, I'm the one who'll suffer." Israel has gone even further, declaring the highest state of alert, activating all its air defense systems, with Iron Dome vehicles patrolling across the country. And Trump, he looks like he's preparing for a strike on Iran as well, starting to boast once again, saying, "From now on, anyone who dares buy Iranian oil will face a 25% tariff." Iran, for its part, is not backing down at all. From the president to the commander of the Revolutionary Guard's Aerospace Force, they've all said, "If you Americans dare attack us, we'll dare attack you. And we have plenty of missiles, more than enough to go around." In short, the atmosphere is fully charged. And then, just like after the U.S. abducted Maduro, some people started saying online again, "The U.S. has won again, China has lost again." Is that really true? Is the Middle East about to erupt into war again? To answer that question, we really only need two sentences. The first sentence is this: there are many different ways to fight. For example, when the US went into Venezuela recently, abducted the president, and ran, that's one kind of fight. Earlier, when the US sent its air force to bomb Iranian nuclear facilities, that's another kind. More than 20 years ago, when US forces swaggered in with massive armies, bombed heavily, and then occupied Iraq and Afghanistan. That was yet another kind. At least 3 kinds of fighting. But that last kind, you don't even need to ask Trump about it. Just ask any ordinary American, are you willing to go? They'd shake their heads so hard you'd think they'd snap them off. Because the US fought in Iraq and Afghanistan for over 20 years, almost betting its entire future on it, trillions of dollars, plus a huge chunk of its national momentum, all burned away. And that was Iraq and Afghanistan. Iran would be even more troublesome. We've talked about this before. Geographically, Iran resembles the state of Qin during China's Warring States period, surrounded by high mountains, a fortress state. The difference is this: Qin lay in a monsoon zone, with mountains enclosing broad plains, water, and food, so it could strike outward and eventually unify the country. Iran, by contrast, is mountains enclosing vast deserts, no water, no food. Good enough for self-defense, but very hard to project power outward. That's the biggest difference between Iran and Iraq or Afghanistan. Just look at a map of Central Asia and you'll see it immediately. Iraq is basically a vast plain easy to invade. Afghanistan has the Hindu Kush like a giant hand. The palm is mountainous, about 1/3 of the country. The rest is relatively flat, suitable for guerrilla warfare. But Iran, mountains everywhere. Even if the country fell, guerrilla warfare would be possible everywhere. And with twice the population of Iraq and Afghanistan combined, it would be a graveyard of empires squared. So the third kind of war is ruled out. What about not sending large forces and instead doing what was done in Venezuela, going in to abduct someone? That won't work either. Look at Venezuela's map. Its capital, Caracas, is right by the sea. Once you grab someone, you just head for the ocean. And the Americans can pull it off easily. But Tehran is more than 1,000 kilometers from the sea. Trying to abduct someone there is basically a suicide mission. In 1980, the US tried something similar and not only suffered heavy losses, but became a global laughingstock. That was during the Iran hostage crisis, when US embassy personnel were detained. Furious, the US decided to send special forces to rescue the hostages and teach Iran a lesson. The operation was codenamed Operation Eagle Claw. The result: 8 helicopters, 3 broke down. 1 collided with a transport aircraft, killing 8 US servicemen and causing the mission to fail completely. They couldn't even retrieve the bodies of the dead soldiers. Iranian forces dragged them away and publicly displayed them. By the way, that special forces unit that disgraced the US back then was Delta Force. Yes, the same unit that abducted Maduro recently. Delta Force also has another famous case, trying to abduct targets in Mogadishu, Somalia. It failed. Many soldiers were killed, and bodies were dragged through the streets as exhibits. If you're unfamiliar with that, watch Black Hawk Down. It's about that very operation. 18 Americans died. So in short, Delta Force's historical record isn't particularly impressive. There are quite a few failures, and not much that truly stands out. The recent success in capturing Maduro can only be credited to 3 factors. First, Venezuela built its capital on the coast. Second, the country's defenses were extremely lax. Third, a very typical South American ultra-relaxed mindset. To replicate that experience in Iran, flying over surrounding mountains, penetrating more than 1,000 kilometers inland to abduct someone, the chances are basically zero. So the second kind of fight is also ruled out. That leaves only one possibility if the US really wants to fight. Fire a few missiles at Iran, then announce "I won," and that's it. But what good would that do? This wouldn't be the first time the US has fired missiles at Iran, and it didn't achieve any substantive results before. Why would it be any different this time? At this point, some people may object. You're wrong. Iran's situation is different now. The economy is worse. Society is more unstable. The US still doesn't even need to fight. it can launch a color revolution. Others say Reza Pahlavi, the son of Iran's former Shah, has stepped forward, claiming he already has a ready team inside Iran and can take power when the time comes. What should we make of that? The same Reza Pahlavi publicly said on U.S. television a few years ago that he had no base of support in Iran and no real interest in Iranian politics. A few years later, still no base, and suddenly, with one sentence, a ready team appears. That's basically a joke. Some people also say, don't be so confident Iranians are pro-American. They may not want a royal restoration, but they might accept some other form. That's also a joke. Iranians living overseas include royalists and republicans, and they've been there for decades. What everyone knows is this: although both groups live abroad, the hatred between them is even deeper than their hatred of Iran's current government. Give them a chance, and they gladly try to destroy each other. Sure, fortresses are often breached from within, but only if you actually get the chance. Everything we've talked about so far is just the surface. Next, let's go one level deeper. Why has Iran ended up where it is today? Why does it always give people the impression that it's on the verge of collapse? As if one kick to the doorframe would bring the whole building down. To explain this clearly, we first need to answer one question. Which Iran are we actually talking about? Some people may laugh at this. Iran is Iran, what do you mean? Which Iran? But that distinction really does exist. To make sense of it, we need to start with another country, a mysterious eastern giant in South Asia, India. When we talk about Indian history, we often say something like this: India's history is actually quite boring for thousands of years. It's basically the story of wave after wave of foreign invasions. So the question is, over those thousands of years, who exactly were those foreigners invading India? The answer is Iranians. Iran's current predicament has a very direct connection to India. Let's still start with Indian history. In one sentence, it's like this: India was like a sheep whenever it got a bit fat. Ancient Iranians would rush in, cut off a chunk of meat and leave, over and over again, forming an almost endless cycle. But one thing needs to be clarified. The Iran of that time was not the Iran on today's map, but a broader concept including today's Iran, Afghanistan, and parts of Central Asia. In the ancient Iranian or Persian world, how were these three regions related? Roughly like this: what is now Iran proper focused on building civilization, hence the abundance of historical sites. What is now Afghanistan, with its hardy mountain people, mainly supplied soldiers and fighters. And Central Asia, with its two great rivers and ample water, mainly produced grain and livestock. So how was this structure completely shattered? It started in 1747. The Iranian king at the time was named Nader. He discovered that his nephew was plotting against Hyman, planning a coup with some Persian generals. Nader decided to strike first, but while summoning his confidants, a slave overheard the plan and leaked it to those generals. They decided to act first and assassinated Nader. After killing him, the Persian generals then fought among themselves over who should become king, plunging the country into instant chaos. At that moment, a key figure emerged: Ahmad Shah Durrani. He was Nader's head of the royal guard, commanding 4,000 men, many of them fellow countrymen from the eastern mountains. Ahmad Shah led his troops to repel looters who wanted to seize Nader's 38 concubines and vast treasure. Then he did something else: he took those women and that wealth and fled straight back to his eastern homeland. Where was that homeland? In the massive mountain ranges of eastern Iran at the time. So the locals there were collectively called by Iranians the mountain people. In Persian, that was pronounced Afghan. In this great upheaval, Nader lost everything. His life, his wives, and all the gold and silver had plundered over many years, all taken by Ahmad Shah. As for Ahmad Shah, he returned home with his men, his soldiers, and huge amounts of money and women, and the entire region was stunned. So much wealth. The elders of the various tribes, unable to resist the temptation, gathered in Kandahar and elected Ahmad Shah as king. Thus, in what had once been eastern Iran, a new kingdom emerged. But soon, Ahmad Shah discovered a problem. He had a throne and plenty of wives, but money was disappearing faster than water. Why? Because to secure the loyalty of those thousands of fellow tribesmen, he had to keep paying them. And to maintain the support of the tribal elders, he had to keep paying them too. So what could he do? Ahmad Shah came up with an age-old solution that had lasted for 1,000 years. Go loot India. And so, in 1759, he led tens of thousands of Afghan troops, like his predecessors before him, through the Khyber Pass, across the Indus River, preparing to make a big score. But unexpectedly, this time, the cycle that had lasted for 1,000 years finally pushed the Indians too far. They decided to fight to the death. Why? Both Ahmad Shah's former boss Nader and Ahmad Shah himself were to blame. First, Nader died in 1739. When he looted India, his methods were brutally excessive. In Delhi, 200,000 people were massacred. The wealth taken was worth 20 million rupees at the time, about $10 billion today. Worse still, he seized India's national treasure, the Peacock Throne. Embedded in it were India's two largest diamonds, the Koh-i-Noor Mountain of Light and the Darya-Noor Sea of Light. Yes, the same diamonds later set into the British crown. This wasn't just robbery, it was draining the pond to catch the fish. Now Ahmad Shah raiding India itself was an old tradition. That wasn't the problem. The problem was this: you were doing it far too often. In the past, after one sack, India might get a century or two to recover. But this time, only 20 years later, you were back again. That completely enraged the Indians. Enough was enough. So what could they do? The Mughal Empire was already a shell of its former self, controlling only Delhi and a small surrounding area, and it had been massacred by Iranians just 20 years earlier. So the task of resisting the Afghan invasion fell to the Maratha Confederacy in southern India. But the Marathas had serious internal problems too. Their battle-hardened old king had just died, and the new king was still a child. The Maratha prime minister, the Peshwa, thought it over. Ahmad Shah only has a few tens of thousands of troops. Beating him wouldn't be hard. But if I personally lead the army north, what if someone seizes power behind my back? So he came up with an idea that was both extremely radical and extremely foolish. He decided to bring all the Maratha armies, nobles, and even their familiars onto the battlefield. That way, no one could stab him in the back. The result: hundreds of thousands of people, nobles, women, servants, soldiers marched north together to face the enemy. When Ahmad Shah saw this, he was stunned. You can fight a war like this? He immediately changed tactics. No decisive battle, only harassment, only attrition, dragging it out relentlessly. And drag it out he did for months. On the Maratha side, with everyone mobilized, daily consumption was staggering. Soon, their logistics collapsed completely. Large numbers of people starved to death. Seeing this, Ahmad Shah rejoiced. Strike when the enemy is weak. On January 14, 1761, he launched a full-scale attack in the half-starved Maratha forces. The Marathas fought desperately, but with empty stomachs, they were wiped out. The ruling elite was annihilated in one blow. Ahmad Shah didn't fare much better. His elite forces were nearly spent, leaving only scattered remnants. Both sides were devastated. This battle is known in history as the Third Battle of Panipat. At the time, it seemed unremarkable, but in reality, it changed the course of the world for centuries to come. And indeed, this battle, which seemed insignificant at the time, ended up reshaping the global order for hundreds of years. After Nader's assassination, Western Iran, today's Iran proper, fell into prolonged civil war, stabilizing only around 1796. Eastern Iran, today's Afghanistan, was left with only 20 to 30,000 old, weak, and wounded survivors after both sides bled each other dry. They could only conduct small-scale raids around India, no longer capable of, or daring to attempt, large-scale plunder. India suffered the most. The Maratha Prime Minister, the Peshwa, had taken nearly all of southern India's nobles and their familiars onto the battlefield. The result: total annihilation. This wasn't just leaderless chaos, it shattered into loose sand, with no idea how to put itself back together. Later, some tried to rebuild states, but they were all fragile, crumbled at the slightest touch. Northern India, ravaged by years of war, was also in ruins. Only the Mughal Empire remained, clinging to Delhi, barely surviving. Across this vast region from the Middle East to India, the strongest military force somehow became the British, with only a few thousand men. That's why, when we look at modern world history, one thing often seems strange. Britain's Industrial Revolution began with the cotton textile industry, and to support it, a whole modern industrial system developed. But the question is, Britain's climate is so miserable that even wheat struggles to grow. How could it possibly grow cotton? The answer lies here. Without the Third Battle of Panipat, whether it was Ahmad Shah's Afghan army or the Maratha forces, either could have crushed the British with ease. Instead, they destroyed each other. The British, in turn, picked up an enormous windfall. At minimal cost, they used Indians to fight Indians and rapidly swallowed the entire subcontinent. They gained raw materials, markets, and capital for the Industrial Revolution, and conveniently built the empire on which the sun never sets. Was that the end of the story? No, for Iran, the real nightmare was just beginning. The British understood perfectly their ability to swallow the elephant as a small snake, and conquer India came down to two reasons. First, the Iranian world had split into East and West. Second, Western Iran was consumed by internal wars and had no capacity to manage the East. So the question was, how could Britain turn this luck falling from the sky into a permanent outcome? There was only one answer: never allow Iran to reunify. So Britain did everything it could to supply weapons and arms to Afghanistan, Eastern Iran, forcibly cutting it off from the Iranian world, turning Afghanistan to a truly independent state. No longer Eastern Iran, they succeeded. What about Central Asia, Iran's original granary and meat supply? After Nader's death, Western Iran was locked in internal conflict until 1796. By the time it looked north again, it was too late. The Russian Shah had already begun large-scale invasions of Central Asia. Iran simply couldn't compete with Russia. So the Iran we see today, more accurately speaking, is Western Iran, and life became extraordinarily difficult. Exploiting its conflict with Afghanistan, Britain trapped Iran inside a mountain-ringed desert, cutting off all possibilities of expansion. Even maintaining a normal state became extremely difficult. How bad was it? The most obvious sign is this. From that point on, Iran lived in a state of chronic food shortage. On paper, its territory covers 1.636 million square kilometers, a major country by any standard. In reality, land that can barely grow crops accounts for only 11.5% of its territory. Truly stable arable land is just 3%. Per capita farmland is only 0.19 hectares, much of it saline desert soil. In good years, per capita grain availability is about 213 kilograms, even lower than India's 230 kilograms. So why do people online keep saying, your ancestors built the Persian Empire so powerful? How did it come to this? Because they don't know that nearly 200 years ago, Britain and Russia's the Third Battle of Panipat dismantled the Persian world into three pieces. and ensure that each piece loads the conditions for fully independent development. This year, the consequences have been especially severe. Iran has suffered its worst drought in 40 years. By early November, national average rainfall was only 2.3 millimeters, an 81% drop year-on-year. Mountain snowpack, which could have been used for irrigation, fell by 98.6%. In short, no water, no food. And at this moment, the US and Europe had threatened sanctions on Iran, cutting off external food supplies. The result: severe food shortages and a sharply devalued currency base. Iran couldn't buy grain. No food, no water, next comes shortages of everything else. Naturally, many people couldn't hold on. So recently, unrest broke out in multiple parts of Iran. At this point, we can clearly see what the US and Europe are really planning. In one sentence, create overwhelming external pressure to make the Iranian government hesitant to crack down hard. Erode the regime through long-term attrition, and ultimately achieve victory without fighting. How do they do this? By doing exactly what Trump has been doing recently, constantly issuing threats, creating the illusion that the United States is about to attack, making the Iranian government tear collateral damage. Frankly speaking, the United States is going to hit Iran atmosphere a lot like online telecom scams. Trump only needs to talk tough and strike a pose. If he can somehow get something for nothing, all the better. Even if he gets nothing, it costs him almost nothing. At worst, he can do what he did last time, fire a few symbolic missiles and then declare the matter over. Actually sending ground force for a full-scale invasion? Impossible. The US isn't even fighting wars right now, and its national debt is already exploding. If it really went to war, the US itself might collapse first. So when the US shouts about attacking Iran, at bottom, it's mostly for domestic politics. There are too many evangelical voters ideologically. They are strongly pro-Israel. Talking tough about dealing with Iran is very useful for harvesting votes, especially in years with midterm elections. So what does all this have to do with us? There are plenty of oil-producing countries in the world. Around the year 2000, just over 20 years ago, when Chinese incomes were still low, international oil prices exceeded $100 a barrel. And now, just over $60, there are plenty of countries willing to sell oil to China. As for Iranian oil and Venezuelan oil, as long as it's cheap, we'll buy it. If we're not allowed to buy, Iran has been sanctioned 4 years and has long figured out how to bypass US sanctions. Ship the oil to the Strait of Malacca. If necessary, transship it and buy it from Malaysia. The United States and Iran shouting at each other, one saying, "I'll hit you," is essentially about domestic votes. The other saying, "You hit me and I'll hit back," is essentially because the economy is so bad that shouting louder makes people feel a bit less hungry. After all, it won't be a drought every year. Maybe this year the heavens will show mercy, more rain, more snow, and many things will quickly be forgotten. Both sides are mostly acting though we can just listen. It's just tragic thought a civilization once so glorious fell into someone else's trap nearly 200 years ago, and to this day still can't escape it, ending up like this. Finally, I have to repeat something I said before. The fall of U.S. hegemony is just one failed regional war away. Honestly, if the US held the true leader what it says, we might even give it a thumbs up. Unfortunately, it can't and won't, though it only talks tough. That's the twilight of an empire.